Well, the project this time is making a custom front entry door for a friend. I'm trying to do everything by the book, and the first step they say is when you get your wood out, you should stack it or in a certain way called stickering. Literally, you're using these little stickers to evenly space the boards out so that they all stay parallel to each other and they can all continue to breathe evenly and consistently. The goal being that you don't want to introduce any sort of warping or twisting or other types of distortion.
Hey, Future Will here. I'm going to be interrupting this video from time to time because in my frustration, I get on a rant. But in this instance, all of that stickering that I did, unloading the truck and trying to lay everything out nice, was a waste of time. Complete waste of time, bupkis. And going forward, when you think about it, gluing up laminations, it makes a lot of sense that it doesn't really matter for the most part minor warps and twists in your boards because you're using thousands of pounds of pressure with glue that has tensile ratings or shear ratings of thousands of psi to hold everything together. So who cares if your board's warped a half an inch over an 8-foot length? Nobody, because you're going to clamp that sucker flat when you glue it up. And if you have multiple laminations, it all averages out. It's your board can be bent straight with just a few pounds of force over the 8-foot length. So yeah, totally wasted about 30 minutes of time on this build.
The next step for me is selecting which boards and their orientation that I want to use for this project. One of the reasons why I prefer to work with rough sawn lumber from this particular sawmill is because they just have a knack for finding really great looking wood. The downside is that a lot of it can be rough and twisted or have lots of knots and other imperfections like you see here. And before I can start cutting anything to size or start machining it, I need to come up with a game plan. What pieces are going to be useful for the stiles or the long parts of the door, or the rails, the shorter horizontal pieces.
Hey, it's me again. Yeah, another waste of time because a lot of those really beautiful boards that had wonderfully figured grain around these very interesting knot holes. In the weeks that it took me to put the laminations together, a lot of those knot holes fell out. As far as I know, this is lumber from the same tree that I used on previous projects, but I guess even though it had air dried out behind the lumber mill for 3 years, something about the hot cold cycles and the fact that it was being moved around a lot worked the knots out, and a lot of them fell out. So, you're caught with this strange dichotomy here where you want the most beautiful figure and grain patterning, which happens where wood is stressed. So in the crotch of trees, where there has been previous damage, or in this case for cedar, around the knot holes of previous branches. And what I should have done instead was stabilize all of the knot holes with clear epoxy. I should have done that from from day one, because when I went to machine the boards, particularly planing them, the knot holes came out. So I was left with panels that are Swiss cheese and a lot of rework and repair to be done on the stiles and rails.
And speaking of waste, these boards had been air dried outside, and the tips in particular had been weathered pretty rough. So I'm cutting off between 1 and 6 inches where the wood has simply split. There's just no structural integrity left at those sections. So rather safe than sorry. I was also doing this because I was running into a bit of a writer's block. I was trying to figure out which pieces and parts of the board to use, and then I realized it'd be much easier to visualize if I could just see what I could keep. Here you can see me starting up my table saw, or my job site table saw. Working in a small shop, in this case a garage, in order to fit these 8-foot boards through my table saw, I have to move the saw and open the door. There's just simply not enough room to do this step inside the garage. All right, next step is taking the boards that have had all the rough stuff cut off, and now I'm trying to get them somewhat flattened in my planer. This can be tenuous because you're only able to take off between 1/64th and 1/32nd of an inch off each side.
Yeah, that was unnecessary. I should have only planed one side just to get it flat enough for gluing and worry about getting the boards flat later. I think I would have been left with a lot thicker laminations, which would have left me a lot more room and tolerance to remove the bow out of them, which was coming despite all of the efforts I tried to head that off.
Before I can start gluing anything together, I've got to make sure that I can get the assembly off my workbench. The best way I found to do that is to take some furniture paste wax and wax the top of my workbench. The only issue I'm running into is that this is the first time I'm using this new workbench that I made. I simply didn't have any other surface large enough or flat enough to make a door that would be, actually usable. So I've got to go through and wax it. And the wax just prevents the glue from sticking to it. And now I'm coming back with a floor buffing pad on my sander, and I'm trying to blend it in. The last thing I want is to take a particularly large and expensive assembly and glue it to my workbench. I'm trying to glue things up and progress as rapidly as I can, so I haven't included the video of me actually spreading out the glue. It's just not that exciting, and also I'm trying to get things done. And as a lot of people can probably relate to, trying to film yourself doing something more than doubles how long it takes to actually do it. And so you can see here, as I'm tightening the clamps, I'm trying to get just a little bit of glue squeeze out all the way around. Wood glue is very strong, but only within certain gap sizes. So I've got to either minimize and uniform the gap sizes. And here's a test of the wax working. So all the glue that dribbled out onto the workbench can be popped off with a little scraper tool. And here we go. Now we're going at it again, trying to do the other style. I was really feeling good about the project at this point. One of my things I was most nervous about was the first style came out very straight. And I was really glad because I clamped it to my straight workbench. Here I am trying to put the glue on. I don't have a high-speed roller or anything like that, so it takes about 5 minutes just for me to uniformly spread the glue out. And I make a big deal of this because if there are any voids in where the glue is, not only can that cause the structure to not be fully adhered and therefore you lose strength, but also it can be a place where moisture over time can seep in and cause the door to rot from within. There we have one completely glued up surface. Now, some people, I think, go overboard and they add glue to both pieces and squeeze them together, and half the glue ends up coming out. So I avoid that step by just not doubling my glue. So here we are, I'm putting it on, and this time I think, oh, I'm going to be a very clever monkey, and I'm going to take the very straight style that I had put a straight edge on before, and I'm going to use that as a clamping call, so that I will definitely know that this style comes out of the clamps arrow true. When woodworkers talk about you can never have too many clamps, what they're referring to is the glue up. Putting something together doesn't require too much, but holding even pressure across the length of something, particularly something the size of a door component, takes a lot of clamps. And I'm very thankful that half these clamps were donations and gifts because I wouldn't have been able to afford them. All right, so right here you can see that there's so much glue pressure that it forced the glue up through the cracks in the knots of the wood, which is a good sign. All right, so here I am taking the door components that have all been glued up. Now they're effectively cured, and I'm just roughly laying out to get an idea of what's it going to look like. Check it out. Doesn't really look like a door, but we've got all the major components in place. Now I'm just using my track saw to put a very straight edge on each of the door components and making sure that it's square. Then I'm going to use my handy dandy little ruler to then determine the width. So I'm working off of some plans here, and each of these components came out of the glue up a little different in width, but that's okay. I was mainly going for an even, uniform glue up, and then I can cut everything to final dimension later. I find I get the best edge alignment that way. All right, so I'm not happy with the saw marks left on the edge of all of my components. If I try to just take a sander to it, it'd take too long, and it would also change the dimension of my panels. They wouldn't be flat edges, they would be rounded or scalloped or scooped. So a plane is really good at maintaining your overall geometry, and it's way faster than sanding. So here I am putting an edge on my plane because I haven't used it in a while, and out of habit I just dig it into the side of the desk to see how sharp it is. So here I'm just putting it all back together. Really only takes about 5 minutes to plane something up. So here I am looking at my components. So these are the stiles. These are the most critical structural components of the whole door, and they are not flat. Now granted, they're only out maybe 1/4 of an inch the whole length of the door, but that's really at the limit of the tolerances that you're allowed. And I didn't know if the door would get straighter or worse as time went on. So I want to start out with a perfectly flat door. And here I am trying to rapidly shave off the high spots that are causing the door to be out of spec. So the door stiles are thicker than they need to be. And I'm hoping if I can project a straight parallel line and trim off the parts that stick out of spec, then I will have a much straighter door. The problem that I realized was that to move this much material would probably take about 3 hours, or maybe not 3 hours, it would take at least a solid hour of hand planing to remove this much material and straighten this piece out. And that was just really frustrating anyway, because this was the one that I had glued up with the other style as a clamping caul. So I thought this one would be the straightest. So I have no idea what happened here, but it's super frustrating. All right, second attempt. So I'm taking a piece of plywood of known uniform thickness, and it's not stiff at all, but I have it on a reference surface, this, and then I have shimmed to support all the places in between. And it's attached with screws on each end. So we're going to try this and see how it goes. Wish me luck. All right, so for those of you following along thinking I was being a little too much of a stickler, if you look real closely, I had put cross hatches with pencil. All right, so this is the end of one of the stiles. This is the hinge side. And this is the other end over here. I put these at 82 inches, so I still have a little bit of room to square the door later. But look, just taking off 1/8 of an inch of bow, removed wood from here all the way down to within about 18 inches of the end of the other one. So when I put my straight edge over it, no rocking anymore. So I'm really pleased with how this simple planing sled saved me time. So why did I stop with the hand planing? Well, after about 15 minutes of work, I had managed to take 2/100ths off of each end, and I need to take 1/10. So 15 minutes of work, and I was probably 1/5 of the way there on one end. I was like, yeah, this is the reason why I stopped messing around with hand tools as my primary method of machining wood. It just takes too much time.